Number 10. Steel Corpse. Steel Corpse is definitely one of the most horrifying alternate versions of Tony Stark. He hails from the Age of X reality, that of Earth 11326. Here, Tony Stark ends up becoming infected with a virus that permanently merges him with his suit, causing him to slowly be devoured by it as time wears on. Still, despite the fact that the suit also possesses its own directives and was slowly overpowering Tony's own will, Tony managed to hold on long enough to ask that Cap take care of him when, against his own intentions at the time, his suit started targeting mutant children. Captain America did as Tony asked, killing him to ensure the mutant's safety and allowing Steel Corpse to die a hero. I mean, what more can you ask for if you're Tony Stark? As long as you go out glory blazing, you know what I mean? Glory blazing is not a thing anyone says. Don't say that. Number 9. Bullet Points Iron Man. Bullet Points Iron Man is actually Steven Rogers in the reality of Earth 70105. Here, Captain America never became, well, Captain America. Dr. Erskine was killed before the Super Soldier project was completed, causing the government to turn to their backup plan, Project Iron Man. Steve volunteered for the plan, which saw him surgically grafted into an old school and, in this reality, I guess, original Iron Man suit. It wasn't old school at the time, but retroactive to now would be considered old school. Does that make sense? Instead of becoming a super soldier, Steve Rogers fought in World War II as Iron Man. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, we have a new channel coming your way. What? It is called Top 10 Nerd Elite, and it is for the most elite of the Nerd Squad members. So get on over there, hit that subscribe, and check it out for all of the glorious nerd bonus content. We're gonna have so many cool, exciting things coming up on there. I'm so excited. Number 8. Iron Man Noir. Iron Man Noir is the alternate version of Tony Stark who hails from Earth 90214, Marvel's Noirverse. In this reality, Tony Stark is still a genius and an inventor who even back in the 1930s managed to make himself an impressive suit of Iron Man armor. Here, Tony is also an errant wanderer who enjoys going on expeditions and adventures to hunt down lost artifacts. Along the way, he makes some powerful allies and learns dark truths about his family. Number 7. Younger Tony. A weird fact is that for a while in the main continuity, an alternate version of Tony Stark was actually the main version, while at the same time still remaining an alternate. Are you confused yet? Kind of like how Miles Morales is both Spider-Man in the 616 continuity, but also an alternate Spider-Man from outside of that continuity. Even though I know what you're all thinking, well, Miles Morales isn't like the main Spider-Man. Whatever, he's a main Spider-Man in my heart. And that's why this is a little bit different, because this version of Tony Stark actually took his predecessor's place. For a time, anyways. What happened was older Tony Stark, the original version, had been revealed to be a sleeper agent for Immortus, aka Kang the Conqueror. As a result, the Avengers brought back a younger version of Stark to help in defeating the hero turned villain. Unfortunately, that didn't work out great, and younger Tony Stark almost got himself killed. However, in the end, older Tony saw the error of his ways and sacrificed himself, passing the torch on to younger Tony of Earth 96020, plucked from earlier on in Tony's own timeline. This younger version of Tony would stick around on Earth 616, helping to defeat Stockpile, Frostbite, Zodiac, and eventually even Onslaught. After his seeming death at the hands of Onslaught, young Franklin Richards brought back all of the heroes who had fallen, including younger Tony and actually the older Tony from before, merging the two together. So younger Tony really is both an alternate and at the same time is part of Prime Tony Stark. Younger Tony, while powerful now as part of the 616 Tony Stark, initially mainly fought without full armor, instead often only coming armed with his chest plate and gauntlets, which is why he ranks so low on this list. But he's still powerful, he's still part of Prime Tony. So we gotta count that. Number 6. Agent Venom. For a very brief moment, Flash Thompson got to experience what it was like to be Iron Man when he donned an Iron Man suit in order to get in closer to Venom, which itself was bonded with Superior Spider-Man, making him lose control and turn violent. I don't know if we'd exactly consider him a true alternate, as I believe his time donning the armor was quite brief, unless there's something that I've missed here, but it's still a cool moment in a pretty cool story, and so for that reason, we're gonna count it today. Fortunately, through using the Iron Man armor, Flash was able to get up close and personal and lure the symbiote back to himself, once more becoming Agent Venom. It was also during this adventure that Flash was also made an honorary Avengers team member. Pretty neat. Number 5. Iron Man 2099. There are actually multiple Iron Man 2099s out there, but one of the most well-known ones is Dr. Sonny Frisco, who first appeared in the 2015 Secret Wars event, making his very first appearance in Secret Wars 2099 issue number 1. While 2099 is a future reality that has been around for some time in the comics, Dr. Sonny Frisco wouldn't appear until later in its continuity. Or a continuity, really. This also, once again, is not the main 2099 continuity. In fact, the 2099 reality actually has multiple different continuities. As I said, it's a lot, it's confusing, but just stick with me here. Frisco's Iron Man hails from one of the fringe continuities known as Earth 23291. Sonny Frisco, however, would later become displaced to the reality of Earth 616, following the destruction and recreation of the multiverse as a result of the Secret Wars event. Like Tony Stark of Earth 616, Frisco is also a genius who built his own suit of armor and was a member of the 2099 Avengers, originally brought together by the CEO of Alchemex, Tyler Stone. At least, you know, in that alt 2099 reality. Number 4. MC2 Tony Stark. In the alternate reality of Earth 982, known as MC2, and not to be confused with the 2099 reality of Earth 928, even though those numbers are very similar, Iron Man ends up retiring. This Tony has a life similar to his 616 counterpart in most ways, with only a few differences between them. Namely, that Tony Stark in this reality decided to retire after an epic battle on an alternate Earth, which claimed the lives of many of his friends and fellow heroes, and left Scarlet Witch in a comatose state as a result of her sealing the portal between those two worlds. This devastating battle prompted Tony to retire, although he would seek out someone to carry on his legacy before doing so. Number 3. Mainframe. This is that legacy character for Tony Stark of the other main future reality for Earth 616, known as MC2, Earth 982. Here in this reality, Tony Stark creates his own protege to carry on the Iron Man legacy, using his brain patterns or brain waves blended with an android modeled after his own armor. This android would be known as Mainframe. Mainframe was one of the original members of the MC2 Future Avengers team, editorially known as A-Next, after the name of the comic series that the team appeared in. Mainframe initially was much more by the book as a hero, pretty rigid in their ways. Over time, however, the android would learn to loosen up somewhat and even be considered a close friend to many of his heroic colleagues on the superhero team. Number 2. Andros Stark. Andros Stark is another Iron Man who hails from the 2099 reality. Not the main 2099 reality though. So many alternate timelines. This version of the alternate future Iron Man is actually Tony's grandson, Andros. Andros travels back in time in an attempt to stop his grandfather from creating Vortex. Vortex was initially created by Tony to protect humanity, but ended up turning on humankind instead, infecting the internet and threatening the existence of all human life on Earth in the future. However, in a strange twist, Andros actually ends up learning during his journey back to the past that it was his jaunt back in time that would actually result in the creation of the Vortex virus. The future crisis ends up being averted thanks to this revelation, but unfortunately it also causes Andros to cease to exist. At least this specific version of Andros who traveled back in time. There could very well still be an Andros out there somewhere in the world, one who, you know, didn't have a reason to travel back thanks to the future being saved. This future version of Iron Man 2099 does not appear in the comics, but instead is from the animated series Iron Man Armored Adventures. Number 1. Dr. Anthony Stark. Coming full circle now, from 10 to 1. As I said, what if Sorcerer Supreme Tony Stark is not the only one out there? There's also the 2099 AD alternate future Tony Stark, who also ends up as Sorcerer Supreme, known as such or sometimes as Dr. Stranger or Dr. Anthony Stark. Although once again, although this is 2099 AD, this is not the main 2099 reality. This is another splintered continuity. This future version of Tony shows up in Infamous Iron Man when Dr. Doom, as the aforementioned infamous Iron Man, appears into the future. However, this future version of Tony would also appear initially in the 2014 all-new X-Men annual, where Tempest would run into him when she attempted to return to the reality where her husband and daughter existed. However, Stark would inform her that this reality no longer existed, and he would actually urge Tempest to return to her original timeline, the continuity of Earth 616. Number 10. Iron Goblin. Iron Goblin was a version of Tony that was kind of combined with Green Goblin through being exposed to the Goblin serum in order order to save his life. This saved him from the spider virus, but also made him insane like Norman Osborn. This version of Tony Stark ultimately decided to sacrifice himself for others, not wanting to completely lose his sanity, and as a means of making amends for all the bad that he had done in his life prior to becoming Iron Man. As Iron Goblin, he wielded the Ebony Blade, attempting to buy some time for the Resistance to escape from the Spider Army on Spider Island, which, if you didn't know, is all part of Battle World, Secret Wars, all that good stuff. Number 9. Old Iron Man. This version of Tony Stark is actually the original from the comics, who died after it was revealed in the Crossing event that he was actually evil. Dun dun dun! This version of Tony was a sleeper agent for Kang the Conqueror, who had brainwashed him into basically becoming evil and becoming a villain. Even the Avengers couldn't stand up to Iron Man alone here. They recruited a younger version of the hero from the past to join them in their fight against older Iron Man. Unfortunately, this only resulted in younger and less experienced Tony getting his butt whooped and nearly being killed by his older self. In the end, older Iron Man was defeated when he basically saw the light and decided to return to the side of good, sacrificing himself and also creating a chest plate before doing so in order to stabilize his younger self, who would then go on to take his place. That's a real thing that happened. The Crossing, what a time. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, if you want to learn about more awesome alternate versions of Iron Man, be sure to show us by giving this video a like, give it a little thumbs up, and definitely do that because there's lots of alternate versions of Iron Man that I still haven't mentioned. I didn't think I was gonna be super into Iron Man and that I would have all these alternates on my mind that I wanted to talk about, but there's actually a lot that I still haven't talked about. A lot of great ones. A lot of lady Iron Mans as well that we haven't talked about. Iron Womans. Iron Womans? I don't know. Number 8. Superior Iron Man. While this is still Tony Stark from the main continuity, Stark also kind of erased this version of himself from his brain in order to... This is so complicated, I love it. While this is still Tony Stark from the main continuity, Stark also kind of erased this version of himself from his brain in order to protect important information from falling into the hands of Hammer's director, Norman Osborn, at the time during Dark Reign. So for that reason, I'm gonna count him, because he kind of erased this version of himself, even though it all happened in main continuity. Superior Iron Man, or Evil Tony Stark, was created during the events of Axis, when heroes and villains had their alignments flipped. So heroes became villains and villains became heroes. It was a weird but overall fun time in terms of what the characters got up to. Tony managed to shield himself from having his alignment return to normal and, in secret, kept his alignment evil. This version of Tony had no moral code holding him back, and at one point almost successfully took over San Francisco with the creation of a phone app and a little bit of extremis. True story. Well, maybe a lot of extremis, because it went into the water supply. But still, I think it's impressive if you can be like, here's an app, it's free, now it's $100 a day! That's crazy. Sorry, $99.99. Because that's a more appeasing price to the eye. Did you know? Number 7. Iron Man 2.0. This was a name that Rhodey took up later on as a version of Iron Man who served the government, but Tony Stark's BFF James Rhodes actually took up the mantle of Iron Man way before that in the comics as well, back when he was known just as Iron Man. Of course, with this being an alternate list, I thought just calling him just Iron Man might be confusing, so I took the later editorial name that was used in the comics when he was Iron Man another time. Rhodey ended up taking over as Iron Man actually way back in the 80s in the comics, after Tony's alcoholism was getting in the way and making it difficult for him to act as a hero responsibly. And Rhodey actually stayed as Iron Man for quite some time, while Tony took time off to relax and recover. Rhodey was an impressive Iron Man, but would eventually be forced to give up the mantle due to headaches that he suffered as a side effect of the suit not being properly calibrated to his brain patterns. Which honestly, I feel like if you're taking over as Iron Man, that should probably be a step that happens. Like, it's kind of rude that Tony didn't think about that. These headaches made him overly aggressive and irritable, forcing Tony to reclaim the mantle once more, because it was too dangerous. But he'd be Iron Man again later, so Yay! Number 6. Iron Man 2020. This version of Iron Man is the brother of Tony Stark and the legitimate child of Howard and Maria Stark, because as we'd later find out, Tony was adopted. But before that happened, they had Arno. Arno had to be hidden away for years because he was sick and in danger, but once that was somewhat resolved, it's kind of a long story, Tony ended up learning of his existence and reached out to meet his brother. Arno Stark is also known for his brilliant intellect like his brother. In fact, he has even claimed to be smarter than Tony in the past, which I don't know, but I personally think that it could be true. Arno successfully modified the extremist virus, attempting to turn it into a cure-all, and at one point using it to increase the Hulk's intelligence dramatically. Arno was also convinced at one point while operating as Iron Man that the only way to ensure peace between AI and organic life forms was to seize control of both sides' minds. Fortunately, he was stopped in this pursuit by his brother, Tony Stark. And I think now he's just like living in some sort of simulation that Tony put him in to just make him feel like a hero while he's like, I'm just gonna do this while we figure out how to not have you be around and be kind of evil. That would be good. Arno just thought he was doing what was best. I don't know what's wrong with that. Number 5. The First Civil War. Well, you might think of Tony Stark from the First Civil War as main continuity Iron Man. He's also kind of an alternate at this point. While at the time we would consider Iron Man to be part of that main continuity, in modern day the version of Tony we have now had the events and basically the guilt of Civil War I basically wiped from his mind. Okay, let me explain. In part 1 we touched on the events of Axis and Superior Iron Man, which happened after the First Civil War. But before this mind wipe happened, it all went down because Norman Osborn had been given the reins for America's superhero team and operation, creating Hammer. To protect all the secrets that he knew, especially in regards to superheroes' names and their identities, because Civil War I happened, Tony decided to wipe his mind. This had the added bonus of basically erasing the events of Civil War I and his misdeeds from his psyche, meaning that he was no longer really the Tony that we knew from that time. The one who had decided to, round up and imprison heroes who refused to register and ally themselves with him and the government. The one who inadvertently ruined Peter's life by encouraging him to join him and ultimately causing him to publicly unmask, which just ruined a lot of stuff in Spider-Man. Tony also ended up in a coma for a bit as a result of this mind wipe. But you know how comas work in comics, they're pretty much always temporary. And Tony was soon once more up and at 'em after having an earlier backup copy of himself rebooted into his mind, because you can just make backup copies of your mind when you're a genius like Tony Stark. So don't worry, he had a plan for that in case that ever happened to him. Fortunately, it did happen, and so they could use the plan. Thanks, Pepper. Number 4. Arno Stark. Arno Stark is Tony Stark's evil brother. His evil brother from 616. Well, he's not always super evil, but he definitely has some questionable approaches when it comes to being Iron Man. He's like Tony but with more questionable morals, I guess. Arno was actually the natural-born son of Howard and Maria Stark. Tony would learn about Arno and also find out that he was actually the adopted son of the couple. Arno first uses the mantle of Iron Man in 2019 in the 2018 series Tony Stark Iron Man in issue number 19. Arno as Iron Man ended up in a fight with Tony during the seeming robot revolution, believing that the only way to solve the issue of humans versus AI was to enslave the human population. It makes sense if you're following Arno through that story. Tony was forced to then stop his brother by trapping him in his virtual armor and placing him in a dreamlike virtual reality where he was seen as a hero. I'm sure that won't end up ending badly for Tony in years to come. Right? It's not like Donald Blake was living in a virtual reality where he was happy and then realized it was fake and then escaped and then tried to kill all the Thors or anything like that. That totally didn't happen, guys. Number 3. Infamous Iron Man. Maybe one of the most evil but also somehow one of the best at the same time was Infamous Iron Man. This was when Dr. Doom stepped up to the plate to replace Iron Man after his defeat in Civil War II, which of course left him in a comatose state. So many comas. 2 figures rose up to replace Tony at that time, one being Ironheart, aka young genius Riri Williams, and another being Dr. Doom, who became infamous Iron Man. While Ironheart was more the heroic counterpart of the two, Doom also learned more and more about what becoming a hero entailed through his journey. And while he was ruthless as Iron Man, in the end he did kind of become a hero. However, this is still Dr. Doom we're talking about here, and eventually he left the mantle to return to Latveria and his life of villainous schemes and plots, back to the old status quo. And because this is still Dr. Doom underneath the armor, I think we can count him as an evil alternate. No. Number 2. Cancer vs. Iron Man. This version of Iron Man was also corrupted, though not by the controversial story arc of the 90s event The Crossing, but instead by the Many-Angled Ones. He hails from the reality of Earth 10011. Here Iron Man became corrupted by the Cancerverse after Mar-Vell made a deal with the Many-Angled Ones, which would cure him of his cancer. Death no longer existed in this reality, which did not bring about a paradise, but instead a hellish dimension. Iron Man became loyal to Mar-Vell, joining his Revengers team. It was Iron Man who also defeated Hulk in this reality, capturing Quasar, aka Wendell Vaughn, who had come to this reality from Earth 616 and had been attacked by the Hulk, which is why Iron Man had to be like, no Hulk, no, taking Quasar with me. Iron Man would join his fellow Revengers in their attempt to invade Earth 616, but in the end they would be defeated. Whew. Number 1. Darkhold Iron Man. One of the darkest versions of Iron Man to ever exist at this point in comics, who starts out as an optimistic inventor and quickly becomes overtaken by his own invention, twisted, driven insane till the point when he starts to harm others with the love of his own iron suit, comes from the Darkhold Iron Man comic. Here Iron Man builds his fated suit, but realizes too late that the suit is overzealous with its protection. It doesn't just seek to protect Tony while he's inside the suit, but seeks to protect him always by kinda keeping him inside the suit. The suit heals him from the inside, but removes his skin whenever he takes parts of the suit off. Tony believes the issue is that the suit thinks iron skin is better than human skin, and so it decides to remove it. However, after compulsively putting the whole defective suit on, including the helmet, it begins to dissolve Tony's skin and then his skull as well. He basically becomes fully bonded with and reliant on the suit. Driven insane, he believes everyone should have an iron suit, and attempts to have the whole world basically join him, including Happy, Jarvis, and his love interest and assistant in this story, Pepper Potts. It's really dark.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Anthony the Vampire. Making his first appearance in Ultimate Avengers issue 14, Anthony was the greatest vampire hunter who ever walked this earth. He trained Daredevil, Blade, and Edward Cullen. Okay, the last one I lied about, but still, you get it. When he meets up with Blade later on, he has a new look. He was eventually bitten by a vampire, so he became their leader as well. The coolest part about Anthony is that he uses a Mark I Iron Man suit to get around during the day, so the sun doesn't, evaporate him or whatever. He captured and turned Smart Hulk into a bloodsucker, but his armor was stolen and used by Stick to fight back. Another Tony, another suit. Imagine you're in trouble and this guy rolls up on you. What a surprise that would be. Issue 16 of Ultimate Avengers opens with a great Twilight parody, but this is also the last time we see this Iron Man take flight. And that's because Hulk punched his head off, and usually when he does that, you don't come back, vampire or not. Number 9. Iron Lantern. From the Amalgam comic universe, Iron Lantern is of course a millionaire who is in charge of Stark Aircraft. While he's working on a flight simulator, it straight up took off and flew him somewhere else. Best simulator ever, if I do say so myself. Then he crash landed on the ground, injuring Stark, and he realized he was brought to a crashed alien spaceship. That spaceship belonged to none other than Roman Sir, who died before getting a chance to talk to Hal Stark. Not being in the best condition, obviously, after the rocky landing, Hal started working with his newfound tech on a new suit, hopefully to save his life. The Green Lantern upgrade of his suit saved his life for sure, but it also gave him the power to create anything out of green energy. He used a battery that reminded him of a lantern to do so. And then he went on to fight the aliens that had shot down Roman Sir and continued fighting enemies such as Madame Sapphire and Mandarin Esto, who, yes, you already know exactly what I'm talking about. Before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give us a thumbs up, that would be great. It really helps us out here quite a bit. You're the best. Thank you so much for watching. Let's get right back into this list of weird Iron Mans. Number 8. Lord Iron. Coming from Marvel 1602, Lord Iron was amongst the other heroes who rose to fame, but a little bit back in time. See, Captain America was literally shot back in time, so the Age of Heroes has to begin there. And in turn, we get some fun versions of our Avengers. Anthony Stark was taken and held captive in the Holy Land during the English and Spanish War, a little different than the cave that he ended up with in our time. He was forced to make weapons still for them for weeks, mirroring Tony's origin in a fun, older way. David Banner was torturing him this time around though, so Anthony makes his own suit powered by lightning bottles. Okay. Now it doesn't matter which timeline Tony ends up in, he's destined to be Iron Man one way or another. Number 7. Iron Man Noir. Coming from the Noir series, Iron Man of Earth 90214 had to go all the way to Atlantis to fix his heart problem. What am I talking about? Let's find out. Tony in this reality was an industrialist adventurer. It feels like National Treasure almost. We meet Tony and the crew and they're looking for something called the Jade Mask. This mask that was said to cure any kind of ailment, so he figured, hey, it's worth a shot to fix the old ticker. It didn't work, so some traitors then revealed themselves once the mask was found, so Tony and Rhodey escaped and returned to New York. He goes on yet another treasure hunt with Rhodey, this time to Atlantis, because he heard a rumor that this power source could also do wonders to his heart, maybe, perhaps. Tony gets the trident and again, he gets betrayed. Zemo and his forces were strong enough to kidnap Pepper, and Tony and Rhodes need a new plan. They travel to Zemo's castle, and it's then that it's revealed that Zemo is actually Tony's father, brainwashed by Strucker. And he was also equipped with Iron Man suits because action and adventure. As far as noir storylines go, Iron Man isn't my favorite, but the whole Nathan Drake vibe that Tony has is still quite fun. And also, Atlantis. It's kind of weird. Dive in. Number 6. Earth X. Also known as Earth 9997, this version of Iron Man hit the pages back in Earth X issue 0. This time around, the human race is at risk due to the release of Terrigen mists. So Tony decides, you know what, I'm just going to isolate myself, not being sure how the mist would react, which is a fair point. So in turn, he would wear his armor all the time, and then eventually he made an Iron Manor in New York. Super cautious, you know, with today's stuff going on, you can't really blame him. He went even further when he decided it was best to create his own team, the Iron Avengers. This guy was super paranoid. So eventually Galactus did come along, so Tony used his Iron Manor and distracted the Celestials beforehand. Now during this, Tony lost his life. Some wreckage impaled him, and for the first time in a while, Tony was able to breathe open air. How, you ask? Well, he died, and his soul immediately went to the realm of the dead, and that's when Captain Marvel's soul recruited him for an army set to take on death. Which is, first of all, nuts, because even after you die in Marvel Comics, you can't just chill out in heaven. You have to go fight another war immediately. Come on. But Death did eventually die, and that's when Tony got another huge upgrade in Paradise. Using the High Evolutionary's devices, Tony was changed into this angelic being, of course, still with wings. And he looked like Iron Man, so that's fun. You can customize your own angel outfit once you get up there. That's good to know.
Coming in at number 5, we have the Iron Maniac. On the dark alternate world of Earth 5012, most of the superheroes of this reality are dead after an unknown fatal error made by Reed Richards. A vengeful and violent Tony Stark makes it his life's mission to get revenge on Reed and modifies his armor to resemble that of Reed's worst enemy, Doctor Doom. This insane version of Iron Man killed the Human Torch and was eventually banished to the main Marvel universe, where he had to be subdued by the combined efforts of Spider-Man, Captain America, and Black Widow, who found it a bit unnerving to be fighting such a far-gone version of one of their closest allies. This Tony was just as resourceful as the real one, however, as he'd even escaped custody by building a new suit from the remains of a life model decoy. Pretty resourceful for an insane Iron Man. Coming in at number 4, we have the superior Iron Man. During an event known as Axis, many Marvel heroes and villains had their morality completely inverted, with good guys becoming bad, bad guys becoming good, and so on and so forth. One of the few changes that wasn't reversed by the end of the event, however, was the morality of Iron Man, who in his evil form still possessed all of the intelligence and dark aspects of Tony's personality, and managed to build a shield for himself to prevent being turned into a hero again. Infecting much of the planet with a new version of the Extremis virus, and using artificially intelligent drones to assert his dominance, this version of Tony was only finally cured by the Marvel Universe's collapse into Battleworld resetting his morals, meaning that this was a villain that the rest of the Avengers didn't even manage to properly defeat. Coming in at number 3, we have Obadiah Stane, aka the Ironmonger in the very first Iron Man film. It's become a bit of a meme at this point that many of the supervillains of the MCU are dark reflections of the same powers and personalities as the heroes they're opposing, and the Ironmonger is the origin of that trope in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Completely guilt-free about selling weapons to all sides, Stain is a ruthless businessman willing to do anything to maintain control of Stark Industries, and shows just how awful Tony's new technology could be used in the wrong hands, and what a monster he could become if he gave up on his deepest morals. Although, honestly, the fact that his idea of upgrading the Iron Man suit is just to make the original one bigger, maybe he's not quite as smart as Tony after all. Coming in at number 2, we have the evil Emperor Stark. Hailing from the destroyed world of Earth 42777, this version of Iron Man was perhaps the cruelest the multiverse had ever seen, as he manipulated Magneto and the Brotherhood of Mutants into declaring war on humanity, then used the resulting anti-mutant backlash to secure power as the world's only superhero. Holding entire countries hostage with natural disasters and even spreading plagues among his own citizens, this version of Tony declared himself Emperor Stark, taking the cloak of Doctor Doom as a final trophy. This was Iron Man at his most evil, and he was an incredibly powerful threat when encountered by the multiverse-traveling Exiles, only eventually defeated by his own universe's last superhero survivor, Sue Storm. A tragic end for a tragic villain. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have Zombie Iron Man. When Earth 2149 was first hit by the zombie plague that's since been highlighted in multiple Marvel spin-off series, this version of Iron Man attempted to use teleportation technology to escape to a different universe with Nick Fury. However, a zombified Fantastic Four arrived too quickly for this plan, and Tony was bitten, becoming a living corpse inside his metal armor and developing a bloodlust and pure hunger for human flesh. Still surviving even after having his legs blasted off by the Silver Surfer, the zombified Iron Man would go on to lead the rest of the undead heroes and villains in an attack against Galactus and gain this universe's power cosmic, meaning he could now pursue more flesh throughout the entire universe and bring the zombie plague to the rest of the doomed cosmos.
Number 10. What If Sorcerer Supreme? In the What If series, we got an issue that explored the idea of what would happen if Tony Stark became Sorcerer Supreme in place of Stephen Strange, and was forced to do battle with the Dread Lord of the Dark Dimension, Dormammu. Oddly enough, this isn't the only alternate future where Tony ends up as Sorcerer Supreme. Maybe we'll talk about that later. It's actually just one of them. Here, both Stark and Strange are in a car accident together, which robs Stephen of his ability to use his hands as a surgeon. Tony swears to fix Stephen's hands, and the two set out on a quest, which sets Stark down a path to meeting and training with the Ancient One, instead of Stephen doing that. After becoming the Ancient One's disciple and defeating the evil Baron Mordo, Stark becomes the new Sorcerer Supreme and is forced to do battle with Dormammu, who plans on, of course, invading Earth. Stark makes for himself a suit of armor to help him defeat Dormammu, which combines both Tony's knowledge of technology and the mystic arts. Number 9. Iron Man 2020. Iron Man 2020 is both an event and a character. The editorial name was given to a different Iron Man, Arno Stark. Arno Stark, aka Iron Man 2020, was Tony's secret brother and the natural-born heir of the Stark family. Whereas it was later revealed that Tony was actually adopted to kind of help cover up what had really happened with Arno and to basically protect the firstborn Stark. Arno would end up taking up the mantle of Iron Man in the future year of 2020. Although now that would actually be the past, because it's 2022 at the time of this recording, and at the time of the event it was the present because it was 2020. The original Iron Man 2020 comic was actually published in the 90s, so at the time 2020 was very much in the future. So for those of you trying to tell me 2020 is the past, I know, but at the time, it's the future. In the event Iron Man 2020, Arno takes up his brother's mantle as he fights against the uprising of machines. Tony at the time felt he was more machine than man, and Arno basically uses this revelation of Tony's to discredit him, taking his place and becoming Iron Man in his stead. In the end, Arno would basically be driven mad while trying to save humans from machines by attempting to take control of all life, both organic and AI, in order to protect them. Don't worry though, because Tony would defeat Arno and kind of put him in a a dream state to make him hopefully be happy until he wakes up and realizes all of the things he thinks he's been living have been a lie, which will probably not be good. I don't think that's happened yet though. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you are enjoying our content here, why not head on over to Facebook and follow us there. We have lots of bonus content coming your way, giveaways and other good stuff, so go on over there and click that follow button. Number 8. Darkhold Iron Man. The Darkhold Iron Man tale gives us a glimpse into a dark alternate future for our hero. In this reality, when Tony Stark first makes the Iron Man suit, something in his programming basically goes wrong. This causes the suit to remove Tony's skin when it is put on and then removed. Tony learns this the hard way. While working on the suit to try and fix this issue, he feels a compulsion to put it on as though the suit is calling to him. And seemingly, without thinking, he finds himself doing so, eventually even putting on the helmet. The Iron Man suit works to remove Tony's skin and then eventually breaks down his skull and his bones, merging with him fully so that the suit can never actually be removed without killing Tony, because now they're kind of one being. But why would he ever want to remove this suit? Driven insane, in the end, Tony Stark believes that the Iron Man suit is actually the way of the future and offers one to every human, turning the population into a bunch of techno-organic iron suit human hybrid monster things permanently, including his friends and his loved ones who he also forces into suits. Ugh. Which would be really terrible because they know what's gonna happen. At least those people are unsuspecting and they're just like, free iron suit, that sounds lovely. Let me run into this and see what happens. Better or worse, if you see it coming or if you're surprised by it. I don't know. I feel like if you see it coming, it's worse in my mind. Number 7. Earth 928 Iron Man. Earth 928 is widely accepted as the main continuity for Earth 2099. This is the same one that Miguel O'Hara, the main Miguel anyways, aka Spider-Man 2099, hails from. The sad reality is that in this continuity, there isn't really a future Iron Man to speak of. What we do learn about Tony Stark's future here is that the Doom of 2099 has dealt with Stark technology before, and that there is basically no alternate Iron Man within scanning distance of Flipside. Flipside appears in Spider-Man 2099, issue number 29, from the 90s, and appears to be scanning for copies of heroes of old so that it can basically copy their traits and abilities, adopting them to become a copy of them itself. Instead of running into any Earth 928 Iron Man though, Flipside ends up running into Miguel and becomes a copycat of Spider-Man 2099 instead. So like I said, as far as we know, there is no Iron Man 2099 in the main 2099 reality. There was a future for Tony, but we don't really know about it. We just know that he was there until he wasn't. Number 6. Stark Fujikawa. While Iron Man of Earth 928 appears to be dead, there is also the existence in this future of the Stark Fujikawa organization, one of the main corporations that rules over the future Earth, along with such powerful companies as Alchemex. While Tony Stark is not among the powerful heads of the company and is not the future CEO, presumed to be dead on Earth 928, in the alternate 2099 future reality of Earth 96099, Iron Man's likeness, at least, does live on. In this reality, Iron Man's likeness is used in advertising for the Stark Fujikawa organization, implying that Tony's future was somewhat tied to the company. At least, like I said, in this alternate 2099 reality, which isn't the main 2099 reality, but yeah, there are lots of alternate 2099 timelines. It's confusing. Although once again, we still don't really know the fate of Tony Stark even here, where his name and likeness still seem to reappear, but the rest is a mystery.
Number 5. Hashtag engaged. Spider-Man Homecoming was released in 2017 and directed by John Watts. And it's amazing. I mean, this version of Spider-Man, this film version, this is Spider-Man. The older Tom Holland gets, the more and more this dude is gonna become Spider-Man. Like, he's gonna basically do what Robert Downey did with Iron Man. Like, it just works. This is it. We've found the casting for this character. Done. Good luck to anybody else who wants to replace these guys. So one thing I hated about Spider-Man Homecoming was the very end of the movie. So Tony has this plan to introduce the world to Spider-Man, the newest Avenger, even showing him this fancy new Iron Spider suit as part of the pitch. Peter Parker, being all coy and smart, thinks that it's just a test and politely declines the offer. He says he would rather be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man just to chill out, you know? So Tony reacts in a great way. He's all for it. He's like, yep, protect the little guys, I gotcha. And then after Peter walks away, we see Pepper Potts emerge from behind him, and in the background you can see all of these reporters and spectators. He really was planning on introducing a new Avenger. Also, after the events of Civil War, really? I always thought that was a weird time to be like, hey, remember on the news when this was a big deal? Well, here to introduce a high schooler with the ability to throw a bus, here's Spider-Man. He even comes with 4 metal arms and instant kill mode. Check it out. Not a great plan, no. So instead of introducing the new Avenger, he has to do something. I mean, those poor reporters, how are they ever gonna get over it? So he grabs an engagement ring and last second he proposes to Pepper Potts. Ah, damn. That's not a bad trick to have up your sleeve. Like, ah, damn, I forgot my school project. Maybe I'll just propose to somebody in class instead. That'll distract them. Number 4, address shoutout. If there's somebody that wants to kill you, odds are you're just gonna stay away from that person, right? Like, you don't just give your address out to the public, let alone, I don't know, a terrorist. So after Happy gets put in the hospital due to one of the Mandarin's attacks on the Chinese theater, Tony Stark decides he's got a few choice words for the man responsible, the Mandarin. Iron Man 3 of course didn't go so well with fans given that the villain was just a fake out, and a fake out that people were actually really looking forward to seeing. I mean, the Mandarin's one of the coolest villains ever, and instead we got not the Mandarin. We got like a guy who turns red. But in his message to the Mandarin after visiting Happy in the hospital, Tony says how he's not afraid of the Mandarin and he in fact should just die. Pal. Do you ever argue with somebody and then you take it like a step too far and you're like, oh, I shouldn't have said that? So Tony gives his address to everybody filming. There's a news crew, there are people on their phones. Like, dude, I get you're upset, but come on, use your smart billionaire head. So of course he gets attacked by the Mandarin because he's the Mandarin and that's what villains do. They attack your Malibu mansions. What did you expect? And out of all of the suits Tony has access to, I'm talking his suit in the final battle for Avengers, he has the briefcase suit, the suitcase suit where he's like, you know, out of all these things, no, this guy gears up with a prototype suit. And of course he gets wrecked. That attack sets up the entire film. Could have easily been avoided if you just didn't give your address out on the news. Silly man. And number 3, Superior Iron Man. So we go now to issue 1 of Superior Iron Man. The issue itself starts off mirroring the tech in Iron Man 3 in a way. Tony can control his suit and fight inside of it, but he's not actually in the suit. He's actually laying in a pool, sipping on margaritas. So his new Extremis armor was fascinating. So much so that Tony released it as like the smartphone app. Now this app allowed people to change their bodies using this virus, becoming however they wanted. And it was great, but then Tony does the ultimate power move and says that the app was actually just a free trial, and in order to continue using it, you have to pay 100 smackaroos a day. Honestly, that's not a bad deal. I would pay that to become Iron Man, definitely. I'd be broke. You know what I would do? I would actually pay for the app, and then use the suit to rob banks, and then use that money to pay for the app. I'm a villain. I guess I just realized I'm definitely a villain. Just said it out loud, there we go. Number 2, Bad Armor. In the Age of X limited series released back in 2011, we find Tony Stark in a rather odd predicament. See, at this point in the series, issue 2 I believe this happens, Tony is infected with this virus that is bonding him to his suit. You ever get like a piece of your sweater stuck to an arm hair and you're like, oh god, what's going on? And then you pull it and you're like, whew, that was close. It's kind of like that, except, you know, way worse. He's even going by the name Steel Corpse, which, I mean, as far as names go, it's pretty good. It's pretty fitting. Now, at this point, he was a mutant killer. It's a long story, but basically when Iron Man went to stop killing these mutants, in like the turning point of the comic, his suit, which was now literally part of him, started to control him against his will. And it's super scary how it looks on the page. Like, he looks so different and sick and gruesome. His body's not doing well at all handling the merge. So his armor starts to take aim at a group of mutants against his will, and he freaks out, begging Captain America to save them in a rather dark way, if you know what I'm saying. So Cap then takes out Iron Man with a shot to the head. Nice move. A little late, I would have done it sooner in this series, but definitely a good call. And finally for number 1, Demon in a Bottle. So the classic storyline that was actually the center of attention for Iron Man 2 back in 2010. So in this movie we find Tony Stark, and at this point the arc reactor in his chest was powered with a palladium core. So time plus usage of the Iron Man suit equals poison. Not great. So we see Tony's life being ran down to the ground. We see his mental health start to decline, and at Tony's party he's hammered, he's peeing in his suit, and then to see a drunk superhero like Tony Stark acting like that, it wasn't random. This idea didn't come out of nowhere. The idea was loosely based on the Demon in a Bottle storyline from the comics. See, this character arc begins with Iron Man issue 120. We see Tony just slamming drinks. The opening shot, we see like 3 mini bottles of gin, and then Tony orders more. And the flight attendant's like, hey, how about a magazine? Because it's the middle of the day. And Tony responds with, nope, I'll do another martini. She even tries to cut him off. She tries to cut off Tony Stark. You know how fat that tip would have been? She says, sir, you've had like 3 already, are you sure? And he's like, yes ma'am, I am. Stating that he's drinking for 2, The other, of course, being his Iron Man persona. That's a lovely sign right there. What happens when you have a superhero who loves slamming martinis? Well, you get Tony flying through the air drunk, spreading toxic fumes all over a crowd. The drunk tank himself even cheated on his girlfriend, Bethany. Not cool. The alcohol addiction was of course put to the side for the MCU storyline, thank God. Like imagine if Tony tried to snap his fingers but he was too drunk. He's like, and I'm so hungry. Can we go home please? Like I gotta eat junior chickens right now.
Number 10, Lord Iron. Although by the end, the Iron Man of Earth 311, the 602 universe, becomes a hero, he spends a lot of time being a reluctant and at times kind of full-blown antagonist. Here, Tony Stark is known as Anthony Stark, or Lord Iron. He was forced to build weapons by his captors and needs an iron suit to survive, which is powered by lightning. He is initially at odds with the Hulk, who as David Banner showed great cruelty to Stark. As such, Lord Iron became more an agent of vengeance, obsessed with getting revenge on the Hulk. By the end of his story, however, he begrudgingly agreed to stop his quest for vengeance and forgave the Hulk for how he treated him before when he was simply David Banner. So it all works out in the end, but this figure was definitely a pretty dark and somewhat evil version of Iron Man to begin with. Number 9, the Stark. The Stark are like a whole alien race of alternate Tony Starks. They are a civilization that was literally shaped by Tony's tech after an alternate version of him decided to launch all his weapons and tech into space rather than let it fall into the hands of the evil Martians who were invading Earth at the time. Obviously, he didn't think very far ahead as to that plan, as all his tech crash landed on another alien planet where it was eventually discovered and utilized by the beings who lived there. They built their whole civilization around it, believing everyone on the planet should have their own suit of technologically advanced armor. This caused them to deplete their planet's resources and left it heavily polluted in the wake of their massive tech boom. Eventually, this drove them to ransacking and invading other planets for their resources, bringing about the same problems their own homeworld suffered to each new planet that they conquered. Note to self, don't just shoot your problems out into space. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists like it where we talk about evil alternates, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Or if you want more Iron Man lists. I don't know, maybe you like Iron Man, you want more Iron Man lists, let us know. Number 8, Steel Corpse. Steel Corpse is a complex character who has moments of both heroism and villainy in Age of X. He exists on the Earth of 11326. Here Tony took the name Steel Corpse after being exposed to a virus, which permanently bonded him to his suit. Now dead within the suit, but able to move around because of being bonded to it, Tony made a darkly humorous joke calling himself the Steel Corpse, and the name just stuck. Pun not intended, but stuck, bonded. The villainous side of this dark hero comes from when he fought against the mutants with his fellow Avengers at Fortress X. However, it turned out that the Avengers were just somewhat misguided in their mission. Once they realized what they were doing was wrong, they attempted to help the mutants, although Steel Corpse was unable to make himself stop attacking. An emergency override stepped in to prevent Tony from fighting with the mutants, and so he asked Captain America to take him off the board in order to save the young mutants that his armor was threatening. Sad story. There's so many tragic Iron Mans actually. Top 10 tragic alternate versions of Iron Man is also something we could do. Number 7, Gregory Stark. Gregory Stark is the evil twin brother of Antonio Stark, aka Iron Man, in the Ultimate Universe of Earth 1610. Initially, Gregory Stark just seems like a better version of Tony. He's smarter, more focused, and is willing to cross lines in order to get a job done that Tony probably wouldn't cross. Sure, he's more morally ambiguous when it comes to his initiative, but on paper he's more morally conscious when it comes to his lifestyle. However, that of course lends well to him being revealed as a villain in the Ultimate Universe. While he never takes up the mantle of Iron Man, Gregory is Antonio's twin brother in this universe. He also employs nanotech like Tony does here and attempts to use it to defeat the Ultimates and Avengers, including his brother Tony. However, Tony ends up defeating his twin brother by sending out an EMP, which disrupts his tech, making him vulnerable to Thor's attack. Number 6, Iron Man 2099. Or one of the 2099 Iron Mans anyways. This version that we're talking about here hails from the animated series Iron Man Armored Adventures. He appeared in Season 2 in the episode titled Iron Man 2099. Here Andros is Iron Man 2099 and he goes to the past in an attempt to destroy Tony Stark. Why? Well, because in his future, Tony Stark, Andros' granddad, was actually responsible for bringing about the end of humanity's reign. He created an AI program built to help humanity called Vortex, but when Vortex got into the computers and escaped to check out the internet, it saw humanity as evil. I mean, if you judge us based on everything that's on the internet, I could definitely see it going that way. There's a lot of messed up stuff on the internet. Andros was the antagonist of the episode, but he thought he was actually saving the world by fighting against Tony and stopping him, when in reality he learned that Vortex was actually kind of created by Tony because of him. Time travel. It's trippy, man. In the end, Vortex is wiped from the future, and so is Andros. But at least Andros is kind of cool with it. He's like, at least Vortex is gone, so I'm good. Bye. Bye, grandfather. Who's now not my grandfather because I don't exist. I don't know, with my former grandfather. Time travel's weird. Number 5. Dr. Anthony Stark. This version of Tony Stark only makes a brief appearance in the comics, having appeared less than a handful of times and making his first appearance in all new X-Men Annual Issue number 1. He hails from the reality temporarily numbered 591, not an official number just yet. Here Tony Stark has become Sorcerer Supreme of the entire galaxy in this alternate future of the year 2099. He discusses the blend and interchangeability of both science and magic. It seems as the years passed for this Tony, he only became even smarter, wiser, and more mystical. Neat. Number 4. MCU Iron Man. Iron Man in the Marvel Cinematic Universe was the one who managed to put a stop to Thanos once and for all. He created a gauntlet capable of handling and wielding the awesome power of the Infinity Stones, and was also the one to discover time travel. Well, to discover a version of time travel that actually worked. Banner was close, of course, but I don't think either he or Scott Lang would have gotten there in time without Tony Stark's breakthrough aha moment. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe as well, Tony Stark is the main creator of Ultron. While this ended up overall being a bad move on his part as Ultron became a supervillain, the accomplishment of creating an AI that powerful and complex is still really impressive. And without Ultron, we'd never have gotten Vision. This version of the character, played by Robert Downey Jr., also really helped to skyrocket Iron Man's popularity in the comics and around the world. R.I.P. MCU Iron Man. You will be missed. Number 3. Iron Lantern. I'm really happy that this is the amalgamated version of this name that we went with instead of Green Man, which is less exhilarating by comparison. Green Man. Iron Lantern is a hero who comes to us from the Amalgamverse, and unsurprisingly, he is a mashup of DC's Green Lantern, Hal Jordan, and Marvel's Iron Man, Tony Stark. His name is Harold Hal Stark, and he gets his powers from a suit he made using a battery that he found amidst the wreckage of an alien ship. I love amalgam characters. Number 2. Iron Hammer. Stark Odinson is the version of Tony and Thor who hails from Warp World. Warp World was created when Gamora folded the universe in half using the power of the Infinity Stones. She then sealed these blended souls within the Soul Stone. While everything would be set right, this version of the universe was still allowed to continue to exist and kind of made its own thing, which I'm happy about because Warp World is pretty cool. Iron Hammer has both the ingenuity and brilliant armor of Tony Stark, as well as the Asgardian strength, immortality, and hammer Mjolnir of Thor Odinson. Number 1. Infamous Iron Man. Controversial opinion possibly, but I think Victor Von Doom is the most powerful of all of the Iron Mans. Doom took up the mantle of Iron Man following the events of Civil War II, which saw Tony left in a coma as a result of a fight with Captain Marvel. Dr. Doom, after the events of Secret Wars, had been looking to turn over a new leaf, and had decided to ally himself with Tony Stark as such, which also meant fighting on his side during Civil War II. In his honor, Doom took up the mantle of infamous Iron Man and proved himself to be one of the most capable versions of the hero that we've ever seen. Honestly, I feel like Doom as any hero or villain would be so powerful. I just love Dr. Doom. I don't know, spoiler alert, I love Dr. Doom. You already knew that. When this happened, even the villains knew they needed to be on high alert, gathering to discuss an alliance as they assumed this would be the only way to protect themselves against infamous Iron Man, only to have Doom drop in on the meeting and make quick work of, well, pretty much all of them. Infamous Iron Man was great, and honestly, it was too short-lived. Come back, infamous Iron Man, come back to us.
Coming in at number 10, we have the Iron Goblin. Coming from an alternate universe where the Spider Island event wound up being permanent, Tony Stark was initially transformed into a human-spider hybrid under the control of the villainous Spider-Queen. During a battle with the Resistance, however, Tony was sprayed with the same goblin formula that had corrupted the mind of Norman Osborn, transforming Tony Stark into the Iron Goblin, with a mechanical new costume to match. And while this version of Tony would eventually decide to sacrifice himself in a last moment of humanity before his goblin insanity fully took over, the combination of Iron Man and Green Goblin tech is still a pretty terrifying combo that Spider-Man should hope never reappears. Coming in at number 9, we have the corrupted Iron Man from the controversial 90s event, The Crossing. When a variant of the time-traveling villain Kang the Conqueror, known as Immortus, began using the neural link in the Iron Man suit to secretly begin altering Tony Stark's brainwaves, Iron Man became a sleeper agent within the Avengers and eventually attacked his companions outright after secretly manipulating them for years. While eventually defeated by a time-traveling 19-year-old version of himself, and then retconned into Tony going back to his usual status quo in the Marvel Universe, this controversial storyline shows what would happen if Iron Man truly turned out to be a traitor. Coming in at number 8, we have Iron Thor. During the event that saw God Emperor Doom in control of a Marvel universe converted into a new Battleworld, Doom maintained his complete control over the many realms of Battleworld with a police force army known as the Thor Corps. One of the most powerful of Doom's personal army was the being known as Iron Thor, wearing a combination of the Iron Man armor and Thor's iconic helmet, and investigating any potential rebellions to his master Doom's rule. Even capable of wielding Mjolnir, this super powerful character still managed to be murdered by the hero Warrior Woman as an example of rebellion against Emperor Doom. He might have had a short life, but man, I really love that Iron Thor design. Coming in at number 7, we have the Steel Corpse. Hailing from Earth 11326, this version of Iron Man was pretty similar to our own, but with two key differences. He's permanently fused with his suit, and he absolutely hates mutants. Fighting alongside other villainous Avengers to wipe out this universe's X-Men, this Iron Man's natural body died long ago after being melded with his machinery, and thus he jokingly calls himself the Steel Corpse as a way of coping with his morbid situation. This version of Iron Man had complete mastery of his weaponry, as they were literally a part of his body, and only a last-second change of heart before sacrificing himself stops this Tony Stark from being one of the absolute worst. Coming in at number 6, we have the infamous Iron Patriot, aka Norman Osborn. Best known as being the alter ego of Spider-Man's nemesis, the Green Goblin, Norman Osborn has long been one of the biggest threats in the Marvel Universe, manipulating events from afar as the CEO of Oscorp. Following the invasion of Earth by the Skrull army, Norman found himself suddenly in the public eye and with goodwill after being the one to personally defeat the Skrull Queen. Norman would use this influence to lead the Dark Avengers as the Iron Patriot, a twisted version of Iron Man combined with Captain America's patriotism that tricked the public into trusting Norman, and showing that Tony Stark is definitely not the worst billionaire in the Marvel world.
Number 5, Tony Doom. Since What If is currently dropping weekly episodes on Disney+, we have to mention one of the more wild issues. What if Tony Stark had become Dr. Doom? It would probably be pretty bad. Yeah, yes it is. So here in the storyline that both of them go to the same college instead of Reed Richards being Victor's roommate. So now it's Tony. Two geniuses in one dorm. Sounds like they would make dreams come true, but in reality it was a living nightmare waiting to happen. Doom tricked Tony into switching bodies Freaky Friday style. And on top of that, Tony's memories were also wiped. So Tony, in Doom's body, gets in heat for the experiment, and in turn, he gets sent back to Latveria. Meanwhile, Doom is in line to take over Stark Industries. He still is Tony Stark, so down the road, Doom Industries was now a competitor to Stark Industries. He's brilliant in any way. The pair end up creating their own armors. Of course, Tony builds a red and gold Doom armor, while Doom makes a green and gray Iron Man armor. I'll give you a second to Absorb that. There we go. It's a fun little swap with good action, but it's a little bit too confusing of a Freaky Friday type plot. But it's worth a shot. Go give it a try. Number 4. Dead Man Walking. We look now over to Fantastic Four: The End, released in 2007. Most of Tony's story here was the same, but during the Mutant Wars, Tony lost his life. Now, he didn't get redirected to a paradise where he would then become an Iron Man themed angel. Instead, he uploaded his subconsciousness into an AI. So now he lives through his armors, just swapping back and forth, walking around, which sounds like a solution, I guess, but living forever? Come on, Tony, I don't think that's a way to go, really. Number 3. Steel Corpse. Tony and his suit have always been so close, it's had its back many times, sometimes even acting for itself and making a judgment call. Like in Iron Man 3, it literally woke Tony up from a nightmare aggressively. We love that future tech. But in the Age of X storyline, the suit literally has his back as Tony and the suit begin to merge. Ugh, I'm itchy just reading this. This started right after a virus began taking its toll on Tony. He was rapidly declining health-wise, so he chose a more fitting name, Steel Corpse, to be kind of funny, but also he looks like a corpse, so he's like, I'm just gonna admit it. He, alongside other, much healthier Avengers, were tasked to take down mutants, but when the gang got there, they of course opted to save them instead. Superhero twist of logic, we love it. Only Tony's advanced suit wasn't exactly on board with his new plan, and it started to act out by itself. It still wanted to save the day, although this was not the right way to do it. Captain America had no choice but to end the life of Steel Corpse in order to save the mutants. Number 2. Iron Goblin. Making his first appearance in the Spider Island series, Iron Goblin wasn't made through any reality warping or anything like that. Instead, this happens during the Resistance assault on Spider-Queen, which is sounding crazier than what I just said. Tony Stark ends up getting captured and infected with the spider virus. He's going nuts at this point, so the rest of the heroes try and snap him out of it by using Goblin Formula, which is a solution, I guess. I don't know, read a book, read a comic book, Avengers. Something bad's gonna happen. So we went from being a spider monster to Iron Goblin. Pretty crazy 24 hours for Tony. Tony was still Tony after this point though, despite the evil green look on his face. Like he even said Norman stole his armor before, so he was just evening it out. Haha, he's funny, he's still Tony, nice. But as time went by, every minute that passed, that formula started to in fact change Tony. Like for example, he was flying around on the glider, although he can fly with his suit. It's not looking good. He knew he was going insane, so he sacrificed himself when the Queen's army attacked. Still a hero nonetheless, although he's mean and green and throwing pumpkin bombs. And finally, number 1, Iron Hammer. Coming from Warp World, Iron Hammer, aka Stark Odinson, first came to life in issue 3 of Infinity Wars. So when Gamora had the Infinity Stones, she trapped everybody's soul in the Soul Gem, and then folded the universe in half, which resulted in all of our heroes merging together. Pretty fun. So rightfully referred to as Warp World, we soon get to meet Soldier Supreme, Ghost Panther, Weapon Hex, and Iron Hammer. Stark Odinson in this pocket universe is the son, of course, of Howard Odin, chieftain of Asgard. He has the Iron Hammer armor, and of course he has a massive literal hammer of the gods to get the message across. Being a combination of both, he can face powerful villains like Stain Odinson, who is a blend of Loki and Obadiah Stane, and even Madam Hell, one of the coolest looking versions definitely, and also one of the more powerful. A great note to end on. Kicking off the list at number 10, making weapons. Now, of course, we see Tony Stark as the genius billionaire playboy philanthropist, but how exactly did Tony end up with all that cash money? Well, in the MCU, it is shown that Tony is running his father's company, of course being Stark Industries. Founded in 1940 by, of course, Howard Stark, the company is the best at what it does, that being selling innovative weapons to the United States Armed Forces. Ooh, now after being kidnapped by the Ten Rings and seeing the damage that his weapons cause in an up-close and very personal way, he of course seized all manufacturing of the weapons division. But the damage is done. It is later revealed in Avengers Age of Ultron that one of his Stark Industries manufactured missiles killed Wanda and Pietro Maximoff's parents. Not cool, Stark, not cool. Number 9, Hulk's field trip. In the MCU, the Hulk leaves the Avengers and the planet for that matter. See, after tossing Ultron out of the Quinjet, the Hulk lets himself fly away on autopilot, perhaps feeling that he's done too much damage and that his presence is causing more chaos than comfort. Well, in the comics, that basically happens, but it's done with haste. And it's done by none other than our very own Iron Man. So the Incredible Hulk issue 92, titled Planet Hulk, starts off with Reed Richards and Tony Stark talking to a monitor, and that monitor is sending footage footage to the Hulk in the ship. They explained to the Hulk their trick, which was to send the Hulk away while he was already in space for a previous mission with Fury. They say they've picked his destination very carefully, which is this lush planet full of vegetation and game, no intelligent life forms. Sounds pretty easy breezy for a creature like that, only of course he ends up on Sakaar, which is not that planet. It's very different. He's actually forced to become a gladiator and fight for his life. Now, the Hulk is out of the picture, right? Mission accomplished, we did it. Pew, gone. Get that guy out of here. Wrong. Sakaar ends up being destroyed, and the Hulk, well, he's got some names to scratch off his get even list. So he heads back to Earth to find the Illuminati and seek revenge, including on Tony Stark. Number 8, he faked his own death. Iron Man issue 284 has quite an interesting cover. It shows Tony Stark wearing a suit, but like a boring kind of suit, in a casket. Ooh. And the text at the bottom of the page reads, "The death of Anthony Stark." It shows all these superheroes mourning the loss of their friend and fellow Avenger. Even Dr. Doom is like, ah yes, let us drink to the memory of a worthy opponent. Like, you know you're sick if Dr. Doom is like, yeah, cheers, I'll drink to you, that's cool. And to make things even crazier, he writes a note to Rhodey that says, "This keycard will give you full access to the entire complex. Take this CD-ROM disc to my office and play it on the AV system." Wow, nothing says futurist rich billionaire like, take this CD. It'll help you. Okay, you have to like wipe it off first. Put it in. So he puts it in and clicks play, and it is pretty awesome. It shows Stark explaining that somebody has to carry on for him. The world needs an Iron Man. And bam, you see a suit made just for Rhodey. What a moment. Tony continues to say that Iron Man was the greatest thing that he's ever invented, and he doesn't want it to die with him. Fair. I mean, it's pretty overwhelming for him though. I mean, all that responsibility of being the new Iron Man, plus mourning your best friend, plus figuring out how to run a company, that's a lot of So finally, he suits up and it's epic. Iron Man lives again, but it turns out Tony wasn't actually dead at all, rather just under cryogenic stasis until a scientist sorted out his spinal software problems. Ha! Gotti! And number 7, he created Ultron. Ultron can't see the difference between saving the world and destroying it. Where do you think he gets that? That line is said by Wanda Maximoff in Avengers Age of Ultron. So Tony has created some amazing stuff. All of his suits, his innovative tech. Barf? Barf? That's the greatest thing. This dude knows what he's doing. But what if he created a supervillain? Ooh. So we find Tony and Bruce working on Ultron, right? Or just the idea at this point, rather. See, Tony had this idea since Avengers 1 that if he could create a suit of armor around the world, it would be a safer place, or rather create a robot that kicks ass, essentially. Something that just takes care of threats while the Avengers, I don't know, read a book, relax for once in their lives. Of course, one of the main elements helping them achieve this goal is the return of Loki's scepter. They think by studying the central power unit of the scepter, which ended up being the Mind Stone, one of the 6 Infinity Stones, they can finally solve this puzzle and be safe. Tony ends up accidentally infusing the consciousness from the Mind Stone into this evil, jealous killer bot that mirrors many aspects of Tony Stark. So Ultron immediately starts to learn about what he is and who the Avengers are, and with his brain being the super AI, he decides they've all just gotta go. And by the end of the movie, we have a horribly damaged Sokovia with roughly 177 deaths. One of those deaths being Charles Spencer, a young American engineer killed in the final fights. Charles's mother ends up confronting Stark in Captain America's Civil War, which ultimately leads to, drumroll, number 6, signing the Accords. Captain America Civil War was one of the most highly anticipated MCU movies, and it's pretty easy to figure out why. The two teams going against each other, I mean, even the poster, I was sold. The movie touches base on incidents like Charles Spencer. How many people have died because of the Avengers? I mean, sure, the whole fun is seeing somebody like Stark create this powerful villain and then use his own wit to defeat him with the help of the Avengers. But like, an asteroid basically hit Earth. I'm surprised more people didn't die in Sokovia, to be honest. So the government sees this and makes every superhero sign these accords. And Tony Stark is all on board. He wants this to happen. He's pushing it. That way the government can control what they do or where they go. So it's not their name that's on the line. And if you don't sign, you retire. That's the deal. Now, of course, some team members don't agree, like, Captain America, who's all about freedom. Tony basically forced team members to sign up and go against his very own coworker, Steve Rogers. It's wild because we see both these character arcs changed in this movie for the both of them. We see Cap at the start, who wants to be this team player and do everything by the books, in Captain America, the first Avenger. and now by his third movie, he's an outlaw. Because Tony Stark didn't listen to him about Bucky. Now Stark, when we first met him, he was cocky, he was rich, he wanted to punch his way through all the problems, even spying on S.H.I.E.L.D. the second he entered the helicarrier. But now, Tony wants everybody to sign and work for the government, all because he feels bad about creating Ultron and blowing it out of the sky. If he had never signed and listened to Cap, the crazy plan of Zemos wouldn't have actually worked. The band would still be together, and when Thanos came to Earth, they all would have smoked him before he even got hands of all the Infinity Stones. Ha! Rant over.
Number 5. Superior Iron Woman, aka Rescue. Rescue is Pepper Potts, Virginia Pepper Potts, and the editorial name used for her was Superior Iron Woman. I just felt that name was more in theme with what we have going on this list, and we already have Agent Venom on here, who sadly did not really have a cool Iron Man related name during his brief time in the armor, so I was like, I want to try to keep it as Iron Man-y as I can. Pepper became Rescue after Norman Osborn took control, leading the S.H.I.E.L.D. replacement organization Hammer. During her escape, Pepper found a suit designed just for her, which also happened to have an AI version of Jarvis inside. She not only has her own suit of highly advanced armor, but she also has the repulsor tech node, which helps to keep her alive after she also had irremovable shrapnel lodged near her heart. But the RT node also acts as an extra sense, allowing her to feel and interact with various types of energy. It also enhances Pepper's senses and grants her increased strength and overall durability. Number 4. Zombie Iron Man. Well, you might think it would be hard to turn Tony Stark into a zombie because of, his Iron Man suit always protecting him. You'd actually be wrong. It was before he could get his suit on that he was bitten while working on a teleportation device thought of as a way to save the survivors on their world and basically shut out the zombies, which makes sense after all. I mean, you want to be light and breezy and not covered in armor when you're brainstorming up a plan and working on tech that, could save humanity. So I get it. Zombie Iron Man, however, would go on to become one of the longest surviving and most powerful zombies in the Earth-Z universe, gaining the power cosmic after devouring Galactus and becoming known as one of the zombie Galacti. In the end, however, Zombie Iron Man proved no match for a raging and hungry zombie Hulk. R.I.P. Zombie Iron Man. Number 3. Iron Man's suit. In the 1998 Iron Man series Volume 3, we get a story where Iron Man's suit becomes its own version of Iron Man after Tony develops a sentient model. Not a great idea, it turns out. This now sentient suit kind of falls in love with Tony and wants to merge with him. Despite all the warning signs, Stark attempts to continue to use the suit for a bit, but eventually realizes it needs to be defeated. When he refuses to merge with the Iron Man suit, it decides if it can't have him, no one can, and attempts to kill Tony for refusing it. However, in the end, the two duke it out and Tony suffers a heart attack. Due to its love for Tony, the suit sacrifices its own mechanical heart for its creator, giving up its life so that Tony Stark can go on living. The whole thing is pretty weird, but also pretty great. And if not for the heart attack, I'm not so sure how Tony would have actually fared in the end against his sentient suit, because it was pretty powerful. I also love the part where he's suffering from the heart attack and he's like begging the suit to kill him so that he doesn't die like an old man. I kid you not, that is the thing that happens. If you want to check out the sentient suit story and Tony begging to be killed because he's like, I can't die from a heart attack, feel free to give issues 26 through 30 of the 1998 series a read. Number 2. Iron Man 2020. I know what you're thinking if you've watched part 1 of this list, but Amanda, wait a minute, didn't we already talk about Iron Man 2020? And you're right, of course, we did talk about Iron Man 2020, but we did not talk about this Iron Man 2020. This version of Arno Stark hails from the Earth 8410, the future. You can tell it's the future because of those sweet gear shoulders on his armor. Just look at those gears, just check that out. This version of Arno Stark is also a genius who is great at inventing things and is meant to be the descendant or semi-close relative of Tony Stark, but not his brother, more like a future relative. A few times he refers to Tony as his Uncle Tony, though seemingly in a more distant sense. It has been mentioned that Tony Stark was his great uncle, though this was before Tony's brother Arno had been established in the comics, so who knows how he's really related? Or if he's related at all, maybe it's all a ruse. Number 1. Ironheart. Ironheart is Riri Williams. Last time on part 1 we talked about another alternate Iron Man from the main continuity who took up the mantle in Tony's honor. And Riri Williams as Ironheart is another hero who also did so, and around the same time too. She caught the attention of Tony Stark and became a sort of young protege and ally of his, after she built her own Iron Man suit by reverse engineering it. She had taken the suit out on a test flight and managed to apprehend escaping escaped prisoners using it, but damaging it as well in the process. When Tony heard of this, he visited Riri and encouraged her interest in becoming a hero. Riri would then ally herself with Tony Stark during the events of the Second Civil War and also be one of the heroes to take his place after he ended up in a coma following his fight against Captain Marvel. Like Iron Man, Ironheart is also a super genius who has managed to invent and create some really impressive tech, sometimes even without access to the best equipment.